Good morning. Happy Wednesday to you. I want to today spend some time going through each of the options for your final project. Each of you has decided on an option that fits your learning style best and really, hopefully, is an option that you feel you can demonstrate what you've learned, the skills that you've acquired, and you can demonstrate your mastery of understanding those and meeting those objectives in one of these four modalities in a way that works for you, that you feel like you can communicate the best. So the first one is the one pager, and I'll go over that in just a moment. And then we have a Google Slides or PowerPoint or Prezi, which we have used before this year. And some of you prefer that mode of just presenting that and more of a technology, that sort of a base, a foundation to that. And then we have the podcast, which I've talked a little bit about, but I want to go over that expectation sheet today. And then your essays. Some of you are choosing to write that 3 to 5 multi-paragraph literary analysis essay. So we'll go over those as well. If you still haven't decided, maybe today's video will help you come to that decision. And then you just need to communicate with me what it is you've decided. Remember, step one, the week of May 4th, was to let me know what your book was, who the author is, the genre, and then what you were thinking of as you were planning for your project. Step two, which was last week, was where you actually started to dig in to organizing that project and thinking about what you needed in it. And then this week, of course, is your step three, which is where you make those connections and you're really going to the next level of analysis. And I'll go over the assignment in Schoology as well today. But let's start by looking at these options. The first one is a one-pager. And if you look here, this is just one sample, and you can see that a one-pager is just exactly what it sounds like. It's one page, and it has graphics on it incorporated with text. So you need to look and think about what images you really want to connect with and show and demonstrate and how they connect, and then what text you're going to use to support that. So if you look at the sheet that goes with that is your one-pager sheet here. Okay. And as it says pretty clearly, I know you can read, but you're going to take one unlined piece of paper. So, of course, that's like a piece of computer paper. What we do not want is just your notebook paper, right out of your notes, just torn out of there. You can for your rough draft, of course, but you definitely want to have a clean copy for that published piece when you're ready to turn that in and submit it. You will need to use markers and colored pencils for your illustrations. All of the writing on the one pager needs to be done in blue or black pen, or I really don't care what color, to be honest with you. It could be purple, or maybe you want to change the colors around. But I do not want just pencil marks or lots of erasers. I want this to look as if this is your final draft. This is your published piece. This is when we're going to frame and put in the gallery. So you want it to be your very best. When you select the images that you want to use for your illustrations, remember these have to really connect directly to the text, to the elements that you are analyzing and identifying and supporting. They're your evidence that you know and understand this piece of literature. So this is not just a book cover, like a book jacket. This is you intentionally choosing certain images that come to your mind as an artist and as a reader. I want to remind you also to fill that whole page of white space. You might need to have a little bit of white space in there, and that's okay, but you want to use the whole page. And there are some samples on the website that we'll go over, and you can look at those as well. When you're working on a one-pager, it's not an essay, so you won't write in complete sentences. You can, but you're really limited on your space. So you want to be clear and concise. Remember, every word you choose, you have to choose carefully because it's going to take up space on your one pager, and you still have to get in all of these items right here onto that one pager in some way. So that will involve you really planning that out on a piece of paper before you just start going to town on the final draft. That's why you have all of next week to just really put that together. And you've had the past almost month now, you've had 3 weeks to organize that, and you know what's going to go on there. See, that's not the hard work anymore. You've done the hard work after step 3 today. You will, or maybe you did that yesterday or whenever you're working on that, but now you're putting it all together. You're going to that production stage. Okay. When you're all finished, you can see, here are all the things you want to include on there. They can be put on the page any way you wish. But all of these elements need to be represented on your one pager. If you'd like some extra credit, then here are some additional elements that you can include. You could do one of them, 2 of them, or all of them, and that will help you, give you a little bit of a cushion onto the rubric for extra points if you want them. When you're all finished, so next week what we'll do is we'll talk about drafting, and then how we move from draft to publishing, or that drafting to submitting. And we'll go over VoiceThread, and I'll be able to go into depth if I don't want to overwhelm you right now. But VoiceThread is just a platform. It's a screen that I will create for you and share the link with you. And then you just upload your picture. So you'll take a picture with your phone, and then you'll just upload that to VoiceThread. And it has a little microphone on it, which I'll go over with you next week when we publish. And you'll just record, "Hi, I'm Snickle Fritz McGillicuddy," and you'll have a couple of things you're going to say about your one pager, and that's it. All right. So that's the one pager. The next item, or next option, I guess, is the presentation. So when you're working on the presentation, that is any type of digital presentation you'd like to use, whatever platform works for you. Some of you prefer Google Slides. That's what all of my presentations are in. So if you want a good example, just go back and watch the lesson videos that I've done, because those are just slides and I just put images on there. At the very end of my slides, I have a page where it lists where I took the images from, where I borrowed them from. And I want you to do the same thing, just wherever it's okay to take them from the internet, but remember, we didn't take them with our own camera. So we do need to cite them at the end, just that we borrowed them from this educational website or this particular person's Pinterest or things like that. All right, so that would be a Google slide. Your PowerPoint, many of you are really familiar with PowerPoint from way back in elementary school. You've used it for a long time. Maybe you're more comfortable with that digital platform, and that works for me too. The last option could be Prezi. We did Prezis earlier in the year when we were working on our Change the Rope projects. So all of you have created a Prezi. I know you have. You've had instruction in that. And so if you want to go out and use Prezi again and play around with that a little bit, that would be a really good idea for you. That's another great platform for you to use. Okay. Let's look at that expectation sheet and see what it looks like. Just click on this button here. And it pulls it right up, presentations. And again, you're going to notice we have the same elements here. Every single project option, regardless of what you choose, you are being evaluated on the exact same skills that we were trying to teach and the objectives I was hoping that we would reach together. So regardless of what you choose, know that your expectations, the content is all the same. It's how you are sharing it that varies. So this just talks about what I just said, the different options that you have, and be careful with too much text and make sure that what you include is relevant and important. Remember, they should really complement and supplement your ideas, but they should not distract from them if you're putting pictures on there. And then, like I said, cite those images. At the bottom, you will see how you're going to share that with me. Again, here's the elements you need, the requirements, and here's some extra credit on the right-hand side. When you're all finished with your product, again, I'll go over this next week when you're ready to actually submit after you've drafted and experimented a little bit. But you'll share those with me directly, and we'll talk about next week just briefly making sure that I have access, and I'll show you how to do that. And just so I don't have to ask you for permission to view it and grade it. All right. So that is the presentation. That's your digital presentation using technology. The third option is the podcast. The podcast, I'm giving you I talked about this last week a little bit, 2 free sites that you can use to create your podcasts. I'm also going to put a student sample here, and I'll put that out at the end of the week this week, probably on Thursday, probably tomorrow. And Then what you'll do is, yours doesn't have to be like that, student, but it just shows you, what you could do with it. It's the same thing here with the teacher sample and then the one-pager samples. So if you want to look at those, please click on those, knowing that this one won't be up until Thursday. The one-pagers are all there. They're all loaded. They're all different types. The presentation teacher sample, I'm just going to walk you through. Click plus to add the slide. And then the podcast is just a student giving their presentation through a podcast. And then I'll have the student sample for the essay here in just a minute. Let's click on this button to get the expectation sheet, just in case I didn't get it in the email, which you should have. So the podcast, obviously, we're not going to see the text. We're not going to be able to see your images or your pictures or your supporting evidence. What we do is we hear you. So you really have to practice and prepare when you give a podcast. I would recommend you write it out first on paper, and then you reread and reread and reread till it's just really natural for you. It doesn't have to be memorized, nor does it have to be perfect. If you make a couple mistakes, don't worry about it. Don't go back and re-record. Just move on through them or just correct yourself. That's what I do. When I make mistakes doing these videos every week, I don't say, whoops, start over. I say, oh, sorry about that, or let me start again. So I want you to practice, practice, practice. That's going to be the key to your success on these podcasts. It is fun to go out, when you are working in Zencastr or when you're working primarily in Soundtrap. There's so many really cool options that you can put into your project. Background noise, sound effects like doors shutting, wind blowing. You can also do music. But I don't want you to spend so much time on those really cool effects. What you're really being evaluated and graded on is the content piece. Remember, those are those literary elements that you have mastered this year. So that's what your grade is focusing on. Everything else is cool, and it definitely will help, but it's not the primary meat of your grade. So remember how to pace yourself. And remember those, when you do add, just make sure it doesn't just, distract from the content that you're really trying to share. I would practice with your voice inflection and, how fast you talk, how slow you talk, when you take your pauses, etc. Once you have, you might want to try Zencastr because it's not as, I wouldn't say it's quite as slick. It doesn't have all the cool add-ons. It's really just a recording. But the neat thing is, like, I could be maybe I'm the author, maybe I'm the main character and I interview another character, or maybe I'm a reader that's interviewing a character or the author. You can have some fun with it that way and change your voices. Or you can experiment with, like I said, the Soundtrap and try that as well. But once you've decided, you've played with both of them, you see which one you like, then you can go ahead and start practicing, like I said, and make sure this is all the same. You include the elements here, then here's the extra credit. Next week, when we talk about publishing, I'll talk with you about how you need to share that with me. And depending on which program you're using, it's going to look a little different. It's just a click of a button, but I want to make sure that I get your projects and in their entirety so that I can grade them. Right, the last option is the essay. So the essay is, the more, I would say, traditional of our 4 choices. And it is also, for some of you, it might be the most comfortable since we've completed a lot of writing this year. You have written several, structured formulaic pieces. You've written some non-formulaic pieces. So I think you have a lot of experience with this. So it might be just what you're most comfortable with. Again, this walks you through, what's expected of you, what is a literary analysis. Keep in mind that teal paragraph structure, topic, sentence, evidence analysis, and that linking, that last sentence that connects to the topic sentence. Remember, everything you write in this essay needs to connect to your thesis, and I'm going to show you that in a sample here in just a moment. But you definitely have to make sure that you're still including all of these elements here. So if my thesis is going to revolve around theme, that means my whole paper is going to prove the theme. And while I'm writing that paper, I'm including all of these elements in addition to theme. But maybe my thesis is about symbolism or about how the conflict drove the plot. or one quote that really summarizes the entire text and its importance. Whatever my thesis is, my whole paper is supporting that. And along the journey, I am including all this information very naturally and in a very fluid progression. So it's how I have strong sentence fluency and my organization is smooth. And again, here's the extra credit that you could include in your essay. And you will turn this into turnitin.com. And so next week, again, when we go over publishing, I will walk you through how you'll submit your rough draft if you want comments, and then how you'll submit your final draft. I do want to show you just an example of how you can incorporate the other elements even when your theme is not about that. So if my theme, here's an example. This is an actual student sample, and this will be on the website. But you'll notice here my theme is the boy's evolving relationship with the conch illustrates Golding's theme that humans, when removed from the pressures of civilized authority, will become evil. So we have this whole thesis statement about theme. However, the whole paper will prove theme. Every other, you can see all these body paragraphs afterward are all supporting theme. The conclusion ends with a big so what? Why is that theme important? Just like any essay. But the trick in a literary analysis is I need to incorporate, here's the setting. I don't say the setting, I say set on a tropical island during World War II. The novel begins when schoolboys, so see I'm going into the basic plot. So I have setting and plot. Here I'm talking about some symbolism. Listen to this language here from plot development. I have exposition, characterization, rising action. When I put that in text, that embedding these quotes correctly, remember we call this in-text, embedding our text in text citations, parenthetical citations. It's also called integrating sources. We only have one source though. So this is how it looks like. We have that sandwich, right? I introduce it, I put the quote, and then I talk about its relevance. And then I transition to my next idea or more information about that particular idea. So you'll see that it's all done in MLA format here, right? And next week when we talk about submitting that, I'll make sure that we go over that as well a little bit, right? So hopefully that helps get you going and really thinking about what the bigger picture is going to look like and what's expected of you, those expectations as well. I want to spend a minute just talking about how do I cite those. I need text evidence, and we've talked about that. I need those quotes and to back up my ideas, regardless of whatever option I'm doing. The trickiest one will be the podcast, because I'll just say it in the podcast. The other ones I'll type it, so it'll be pretty clear. Let's look at how we type it, and then I'll model how we're going to say it if we're doing the podcast. Here we have the embedding of these citations, how I do that, embedding those quotes, and that's source integration. So you'll notice here's the quote. I borrowed this text from the author. The author here is Moore, quotation marks, no punctuation, remember that? Then parentheses, author, space, page, parenthesis, and the period goes on the outside. So that's how it will look on your paper. And we really talk about that quote sandwich again. I introduced the quote. So what was happening prior to this being spoken, or the author stating this? And then that helps us know, because not everybody obviously has read your book. Okay? Then you put the quote in there. Make sure you cite it correctly, just like this. And then you do the relevancy. That's the analysis and relevance. So I want to know what you were thinking about her reluctance. What does it show? What does it demonstrate? What is the author doing? How is it important? That's what you want to think about. When you introduce it, there's different ways to do this. Like, where does it occur? Who's speaking? What's happening? How is it connecting to your thesis and your ideas? And then you put the quote. And then again, lots of different ways to analyze it. But for the most part is, how does it really support what you're trying to say with your thesis? Why is it important? The big so what? Why did I choose this quote out of all the entire words in this novel or short story? So here's an example. If the student's thesis, I read you the sample already on another, just a couple minutes ago, but their thesis was about symbolism, remember. So here's the source integration. When the conch is first found and blown, it brings everyone together. So here's the first piece of bread we're introducing this quote. This is what's going on. This is the important object. Remember, we talked about symbolism. Ralph found his breath and blew a series of short blasts. Piggy exclaimed, "There's one." So be very careful. This is an interesting example because these double quotes, remember, these are the author. I pulled it from the book. But there's a character speaking in the book. Piggy exclaimed. So we have single quote, the character's words, single quote because that's the character Piggy, and then double quote because I borrowed that from Golding, the author of Lord of the Flies. So I have that as my second quote. And it looks kind of funny, right? Single, double. But that's exactly how it needs to look. This is an interesting example because it is an exclamation point. So we do include it. If it were a period, we would not include it. You only would put an exclamation mark or a question mark. If it's a period, you leave it out because then we have parenthesis, author, page number, parenthesis, period. And now we have the last piece of bread. So we had bread, meat, and bread. This is the relevancy or why it's important. Here, Piggy observes one boy emerging from the jungle, but soon boys can form all around. Each comes for his own reason, some for plain curiosity, other for the prospect of rescue. And that's important to the plot. And this conch, this giant seashell, is part of our symbolism. So it's all coming together. If I'm reading on a podcast, so this is how I type it, or handwrite it, if I'm going to be handwriting on my one pager. But if I am reading it on the podcast, I will read it like this. When the conch is first found and blown, it brings everyone together. Quotation. Ralph found his breath and blew a series of short blasts. Piggy exclaimed, "There's one!" End quote. Golding, 16. Here, Piggy observes one boy emerging from the jungle, but so you have to hear us say quote and end quote. My voice should change. I don't say parenthesis, I just say Golding, 16. You can even say page 16 as a high schooler. It's really not a big deal. Or you can even say this is found on page 16. But you do need to still let us know where you found it and you have proof that you did. All right, so that is the gist of it. That's all we needed to really go over. And I'm hoping that you're going to have fun with this project. I want you to just be creative and show what you know and pick away an option that you will enjoy doing and hopefully be able to communicate to me exactly what you know about literature and analyzing it, reflecting on it, and connecting to it. Have a great day. If you have any questions, come into office hours and I'd be happy to see you and, of course, to help you. Take care.